Today we're going to be working in my workbook called the Book of Esther, and it's on the whole book of Esther and looking at the table of contents. Maybe. There you go. We have already uh, taken care of the first 8 chapters and trying to make this story short. It's a very, very good story. I would recommend reading each chapter because it's very, very good. Originally, there was a plot. There was a problem, and Queen Vashti had to be dethroned, removed as queen, and Esther becomes queen. Esther is a Jew, but this is in the Persian Empire, so she holds that she's a Jew away from the king. And then we can get the villain of the story, Haman, who through the huge story here, he decides to kill all the Jews. So Esther finds out about it. So she's going to try to help her people, but she prays, or that is, she and the Jewish people fast for 3 days. Then she sees the king, requests a banquet with the king and Haman. And the first banquet, she just asks for another banquet date. And in that time between the first and second banquet, we have the twist of fate, which is a really interesting and fun twist to the story, where Haman becomes frustrated and it's just a very, very good chapter. Then on the second banquet, Esther then points out that she's a Jew, that her whole people are supposed to be exterminated, and that Haman is the cause of it. So he's accused and sentenced, and he is hung on a impaling pole. Then in chapter 8, he allows Mordecai and Esther to come up with another decree, because the decree could not be reversed as far as the Jews being annihilated. So they come up with a counter decree where the Jews can defend themselves on that day, but they can only defend. They can't start. They can only defend. So now we come down to the actual fateful day, the 12th day of Adar, and when both edicts come into play. You would think, logically, if people knew that the Jews could fight back, that they wouldn't even start a fight. But unfortunately, that's not what happens. So anyway, let's go to chapter 9. The Faithful Day, Esther chapter 9, verses 1 through 19. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar, the edict commanded by the king was to be carried out. On this day, the enemies of the Jews had hoped to overpower them, but now the tables were turned, and the Jews got the upper hand over those who hated them. The Jews assembled in their cities and all the provinces of King Xerxes to attack those determined to destroy them. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. So basically, they couldn't initiate the fight, but they could defend themselves and fight back if they were attacked. And you would think that nobody would attack, but there you go. So there's 2 edicts that were to be carried out. Which are they? That one is the edict to annihilate and destroy the Jews, and the other one is the edict that the Jews can defend themselves and fight back and kill anybody who's trying to kill them. What are the 2 specific orders of the Haman's edict? The 2 specific orders of the Haman's edict was to kill, destroy, and annihilate all the Jews, and to plunder the goods of the Jews. What is one difference of Mordecai's edict to Haman's edict? The one difference is that that is not in the Haman's edict is the right to assemble and protect themselves. So in Haman's edict, the Jews were going to be attacked. In Mordecai's, they have the right to defend themselves. Which side got the upper hand in this battle? The Jews did. All the nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king's administrators helped the Jews because fear of Mordecai had seized them. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. Who helped the Jews? The nobles of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the king administrators. Why did they help the Jews? Because they were fearful of Mordecai. The increase in Mordecai's influence is also described in three ways. What are they? Prominent in the palace, reputation spread throughout the provinces. He became more and more powerful. And number 4, completing the thing from prior page. No one could stand against them because, let's see, because I can go to the next page, or I can go to my answers here. You can go to the next page, of course. Okay. No one could stand against them because the people of all the other nationalities were afraid of them. People of all the other nations were afraid of them, and fear of the Mordecai had seized them. Do you see God's hand here? Absolutely. Why or why not? Because God is going to protect his Jewish nation. And so I definitely see that the fear and the desire to be Jewish and all this comes from God's fear. The Jews struck down all their enemies with the sword, killing and destroying them, and they did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the citadel of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men. They also killed Parsenthatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adala, Erida, Parmasta, Arisai, Eridai, and Bisada, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews, but they did not lay hands on the plunder. And the definition of plunder is to take the goods from another, usually in time of war. Why they didn't take anybody's plunder, I don't know. In the citadel of Susa, how many men did the Jews kill? 500 men. How many sons did Haman have? 10. During this time in history, families avenging the death of their relatives were common. So to prevent this, Haman's sons were specifically targeted. What did the Jews not lay their hands on? Any plunder. According to the Edict of Mordecai, were they allowed to take the plunder? Yes. According to the Edict of Mordecai, they were allowed to take the plunder. Why do you think the Jews did not take the plunder of their enemies? Perhaps they didn't take the plunder because they didn't need it or there wasn't time. Bible scholars believe it's because the Jews were more interested in their lives than in getting rich. I'm not sure we truly know the reason. The number of those killed in the citadel of Susa was reported to king that same day. The king said to Queen Esther, "The Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men and 10 sons of Haman in the citadel of Susa. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? It also will be granted." How many total were killed in the citadel of Susa? 500 men. 510 totally. The king asked Queen Esther 3 questions. What have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? What is your petition? What is your request? What does the king say that gives us the impression that he's not unhappy with the results? I will give you anything you ask. If it pleases the king, Esther answered, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this day's edict tomorrow also, and that Haman's 10 sons be impaled on poles. So the king commanded that this be done. An edict was issued in Susa, and they impaled the 10 sons of Haman. The Jews in Susa came together on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they put to death in Susa 300 men, but they did not lay their hands on the plunder. Now, this is, yeah, obviously it gets gruesome. Old Testament stuff is a little more gruesome than we're used to. But realize when they impaled or hung the 10 sons, they had already been killed, if that makes it easier. Esther responds to the king question with 2 requests. They are, give the Jews in Susa permission to carry out this edict tomorrow also, and let Haman's sons be impaled on poles. Does the king approve the queen's request? Absolutely. How many more men were killed on the 14th day of Adar in the citadel of Susa? 300 men. Were the sons of Haman already dead before they were impaled? Yes. Did the Jews take any plunder on this day? No, they did not. Meanwhile, the remainder of the Jews who were in the king's provinces also assembled to protect themselves and get relief from their enemies. They killed 75,000 of them, but did not lay their hands on the plunder. This happened on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and on the 14th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. The Jews in Susa, however, had assembled on the 13th and 14th. Then on the 15th they rested and made it a day of feasting and joy. This is why the rural Jews, those living in villages, observed the 14th of the month of Adar as a day of joy and feasting, a day for giving presents to each other. So there was quite an animosity against the Jews, but the Jews were able to get the upper hand, and somehow the king was accepting of all this. How many enemies of the Jews were killed in the 127 provinces? 75,000. Wow, quite a bit. Did the Jews in the 127 provinces take any plunder? No. So outside the citadel of Susa, did it take 1 day or 2 days to succeed over the enemies? Outside the city of Susa, it took 1 day. What did these Jews in the 127 provinces do on the 14th day? They celebrated and had a feast. Although we don't know the actual reason why the Jews did not take the plunder, some Bible scholars believe that it was because the object was not wealth, but freedom from prejudice and persecution. So we come to the end of this gruesome chapter. And so we've come to the crossword. So, number 4, who was becoming more and more powerful? Mordecai. Number 5, what did the Jews not take from their enemies? Plunder. Number 6, what day of the month were the edicts to take place? 13th day of Adar. Then 7, on the 13th day of the 12th month, the edicts took place. Right. One down. What day of the month did the Jews in the provinces celebrate? The 14th day. Yeah. What is the name of the month that the edicts were to happen? Adar. Who is the father of the 10 sons killed? Haman. So that's the end of this very gruesome chapter. But we actually have another chapter after this. And so I hope you come back and see it. Talk to you later. Bye-bye now.